Okay, so now that we have the input actions set up in the editor and we have the main mapping context, what we need to do is we need to jump into the Paladin character header, and then what we need to do is we need to set up a include, and what we need to include is the input action value. Input action value, and down here what we need to do is we need to declare some classes. We need to do a U input mapping context. So class U input mapping context, and a class of U input action. U input action. So let's go down to the protected section. So we're in the protected section. We can set up the input actions. Input actions. This is where all the input actions are going to be. And this needs to be a U property. So a U property edit anywhere. And that's going to be a category. The category is going to be enhanced input. And we want to do a U input mapping context. Input mapping, and we need to copy that because that's going to be the same one, and under that we need to do a U input action. U input action. Make that a pointer, and that's just going to be U input action. That is just going to be a move action. So now that we have that, we also need to set up where the function is, the move function. So we're going to have underneath here, I'm just going to create another comment, and we're just going to call this movement. This is going to have the move, the lookup, the jump, things like that. So that's just going to be move, and then it's going to be a const f input action value, and that's going to be an input value. Okay, so now I'm just going to come over here, click on that, and do generate definition. And that's just going to go ahead and generate that. And I believe that's all we need to do in the header file. So save that and jump back over to the CPP file. What we want to do is go up to the very top. So at the very top, there is some includes that we need to do. We need to add a enhanced input subsystem, a enhanced input component. So what we are going to do is we're going to do include, and we want to include a enhanced input subsystem, and we want to include a enhanced input component, because we need to set that up in the begin play. So if we go down here to begin play, so now that we're in the begin play, we want to add input mapping content, and this is going to be an if statement. It's going to be an if statement. It's going to be a player controller. That's going to be a pointer, and let's say player controller. We just need to just do a simple cast to a player controller, and that's just going to be controller like that. Then what we need to do is we need to get local player subsystem. That's going to be another if statement, and this if statement is quite long. So I would really pay attention and make sure you double check this. So this is going to be enhanced input local player subsystem. Enhanced local player subsystem. It's going to be a pointer. And we're just going to say subsystem. You local player get subsystem. You enhanced input local player subsystem. This is going to be the player controller, and from there we're going to get local player. So double check to make sure you have all of that correct. I like Writer because it does the code completion quite well. So then we need to add input contacts. So a sub system. We need to add a mapping contacts, and that is going to be the input mapping. And we'll just set that to 0. So add mapping contacts. So now that that is set up, what we need to do is we need to just go down to the move. And I believe the move is right here. So with the move, we have the F input action value. That is being brought in by that's a constant. It's input action value. So we have an input value here. So what we need to do is we just need to create an F vector 2D. We're going to do an input vector. That's just going to be input value, and that's going to be a get F vector 2D. And for some reason I keep doing that. Code completion, I guess, is a little bit too good, or I'm just have a habit of just typing it in. But when we do it, if we have to check to see if it's valid. If is valid, we need to check to make sure a controller is valid. If we don't have a controller, then there's no reason to do all this. So we do a forward, get forward direction. We're going to do a const F rotator, and that's going to be the rotation. Whoops. That's going to be controller get controller rotation, and then we're going to do another const F rotator. This one is going to be the yaw rotation. That's going to be a yaw rotation, and that's going to be 0 rotation dot yaw. and like that. Then we need to get the rotation matrix. We need to set that up. Rotation matrix. So we need to do a const f vector, just a regular f vector, and a forward direction. Forward direction equals f rotation matrix. Rotation matrix. We just need to set up the yaw rotation. And this is going to be a get unit axis, e axis, e axis. That is just going to be the x axis. And I just want to get rid of some of these white spaces. Const. This is going to be another f vector. And I misspelled the direction, forward direction. There we go. So then we need to do a right direction. Right direction. F rotation matrix. That's going to be a yaw rotation. Yaw rotation. We need to get the unit axis. This is going to be the e-axis y. E-axis y. So now that the rotation matrix is set up, we need to add movement input. We need to add movement input. And add movement input forward direction input vector y, and then add movement input right direction input vector x. So we just do add a movement input. It's a forward direction, do input vector y, and then we do add movement input. We do a right direction input vector x. So all of that should be set up correctly so we can get all the input values from the keyboard to move around. So now what we need to do is we need to go into this setup player input component. And I believe that is down here. Yes, setup player input component. Right underneath the super. What we need to do is just say movement actions, and now we need to bind the action to the move action that we created. And if you come here, this right here, the move action. This edit anywhere, as you can see, it says edit anywhere category enhanced input. When we fire up the editor, you'll understand how that's all set up. Okay, so now we're down in here in the setup player input components. What we need to do is type in another if statement. If you enhanced input component. As a pointer, and we need to do input equals cast checked u enhanced input component. We need to check to make sure everything is set up, and then we do player input component. And then we need to make a comment. I'm just going to say movement actions. I always put the comments down here. It says like movement actions and like attack actions, things like that. Just try to keep it a little bit clean. And then right here, you just want to do input. And we need to bind the action. So we need to bind the action to the move action. The move action is this right here. And that's a U input action. And it says it's a U property. It's edit anywhere because we're going to go in the blueprint and we're going to actually set that up in the player blueprint. So we do move action, we do E triggered, do an E triggered this, and we have to set up the A Paladin character move, because this is the move function we set up in the header. So everything should be set up and ready to go. So what we need to do is I'm going to go ahead, and you don't see it on my screen, but I'm going to go ahead and go up to the right, and under the build menu I'm just going to click on rebuild. And the reason I'm doing that, I just want to see what, make sure it rebuilds and if there's any errors that we might have to fix. And as you can see here, it says Apple because I'm on a Mac. Okay, so now it says deploying now, so everything looks good. I just get in the habit of doing a rebuild sometimes when I do something big like this. I mean, you can just come up here and just click on this and just go ahead and deploy it, and it's going to fire up the editor, and if there's any errors it's going to show you. I just have a habit of just clicking rebuild. So what we have to do is we have to go into the Paladin character blueprint, and if you scroll down right here, enhanced input, this comment right here, if you look at the code and you go into the header, enhanced input category, it puts them into the categories enhanced input. We have an input mapping and a move action. So right here we have an input mapping and we have a move action. So that is showing up because we have the edit anywhere. And what we need to do is the input mapping, we need to set it to our main mapping contacts. And then a move action, we need to set that to the move IA, and we need to compile and save. So when you go to test map and you click play, you click inside the screen, you can move forward, you can move backwards, you can move left, and you can move right. There's no jumping, there's no running, and you can move diagonal if you want. You can move all around. So now we have movement. Of course, we don't have the animations because we need to set up the anim instance, and we'll go over that. But at least you have movement in your character. So to recap, what we did was, after we created the input action and the context mapping and editor, we came up here in the header file, we put the input action value, we did the declarations, the class, U input mapping context, and a U input action. Then we came down here, and this right here, we set up for it to show up in the blueprint under the category enhanced input. We have the input mapping, and we have move action. Then you have to create the function, we created the function, But first, what we did is we came up here and we included enhanced input subsystem, enhanced input component. Then down in the begin play, what we have to do is we have to check to make sure we have a player controller, and if we do, we set up the local subsystem. And we set up the add input contacts, and then we set up the move here. We do input vector, we check to see if the controller is valid, we get the F rotator, we get the rotation, and we get the yaw rotation. We set up a rotation matrix for a forward direction and the right direction. Then we do the add movement input. You have to add movement input, forward direction on the Y, right direction on the X axis. And then we came down here, called to bind functionality to input. This is already set up for us, so we do the setup player input component inside here. Under super, we do if enhance input component. If that is true, and we cast check player input component, and we set up the move actions. Underneath here, this is where we're going to add all of our, like, let's say, attack actions. So that's where we're going to have all of our attack actions and things like that. So that's how you set up the movement and for the new enhanced input system with C++. Thank you. Goodbye for now.